Welcome back to Midday Musings on Life and Leadership. I'm so glad you're joining us for today's conversation, Generational Reset. Every episode, we sit down to explore what it takes to lead well, love well, and grow well. And today's discussion looks at how we can better understand and walk alongside the next generation as they navigate faith. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to Generational Reset. We're so glad that you've chosen to spend this time with us. Now, today is not about debating generations or reinforcing any stereotypes. It's about listening. So across the world, many churches, ministries, parents, educators, organizational leaders are asking similar questions. Questions like, why are young adults engaging differently in faith? What are they actually searching for? How can we build trust rather than just assumptions? So our hope is that today's conversation will leave you with a greater understanding, some practical insights, and a renewed hope for the next generation. How many Christian denominations are there worldwide? So take your guess. Number 2 is how many millennials are there in the world today? Our focus of our conversation today is about millennials, so we want to know how many are out there. Take your best guess.
All right, we're going to find out through the conversation what the answer to these questions were. Excellent. Thank you, Pam. And thank you, everyone, again for joining us today. I really believe that today is a special day because we are here and we're interested to know how we can have this conversation. And we are all thinking, how do we influence our next generation? And it's my privilege and honor to introduce today's guest, Dr. Mayple Dorrington. Welcome. She's the author of Kaleidoscope, Millennials Posture Towards Christianity. She is a chartered banker, business consultant, educator, and a researcher with professional experience spanning 27 countries. Her work combines leadership, finance, education, and cognitive behavioral counseling with a deep passion for mentoring young people and helping them flourish. She's also an author of Finding the Oasis in My Soul, a book that I've read. Dorrington holds a PhD in cognitive behavioral counseling. She has an MBA in international finance and a bachelor's degree in economics. She and her family reside in Ontario, Canada. Mayple, thank you for joining us. She's a great friend. She's always full of wisdom and always willing to share that wisdom with people around. So welcome, Dr. Mayple Dorrington.
Thank you, Rita, for your kind introduction. Sometimes it is strange to hear someone else speak about you, but I really appreciate your kind words. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Nice to see some familiar faces and, of course, some new ones. You all have incredible wisdom, and the next generation is depending on us. And hopefully, our conversation this morning will help us look more closely at ourselves to tap into our past experiences, our current realities, and to embrace perhaps new possibilities as we try to find common ground in advancing the mission of making disciples of all nations. So I'm very thrilled today to be with you all, and I would like to thank Pam and Rita for this opportunity.
Before we dive into all the findings, can you tell us the story behind the research? Like, what made you realize this is a conversation that mattered?
Thank you, Pam, for that question. And of course, it is usually very important that we set context. And so what I realize is that there is so much information that we can get from our next generation if we just take the time to understand them a little more and to tap into their mindset. So after 30 years in the corporate space and having engaged with through my various volunteer activities, I've engaged a number of youth and other multi-generational groups And I noticed a distinct pattern that may not be unique, but it is indeed very pervasive among the millennial generation. They're bold, eco-friendly, unapologetic, visible vanguard, living out loud approach triggered my natural curiosity. And so I decided that perhaps it would be a good opportunity to tap into that level of curiosity in understanding that generation a little more. So with that in mind, I delved into the research, and with extensive studies across various constituents, and it was enriched by focus groups, one-on-one interviews with millennials who were thought leaders, academias, and various other fields. My research was also deeply informed by my personal experience, working closely with over 600 youth and traveling to over 65 countries to date. But I didn't want to just rely on my limited scope, so I incorporated data from the Pew Research Center, Arizona State Christian Center, Stats Canada, Angus Reid, Grandview, Statistica, and more. So that bringing it all together would give us a more empirical, credible story of the various conversation and various data that we put together in getting their viewpoints. And so with that, I documented all of this information in my book that Rita alluded to, which is A Kaleidoscope, Millennials Posture Toward Christianity. And your question regarding why this conversation matters is that this is driven by a number of prevailing factors at the moment. The millennial generation is the largest demographic cohort on Earth today, and they range from 30 to 45 years old. And this generation is one of the most analyzed, debated, and misunderstood generations in modern history. Whether through social media or my direct personal interaction about their career goals and other discussions, I discovered that they have a very strong defense for their individuality. They have repeatedly shared that they want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be validated. And so with this cohort coming of age today, they are now stepping into position of power and influence and bringing with them fresh perspective and a deep desire for meaningful change. They are also digital natives, and so they garner incredible reach and breadth in the viral space. And we can see this evident in their voice being heard in the workplace, at the ballot box, in marriage, in parenting, in money, in environment, and of course in organized religion. So the next generation is questioning and arguably reshaping society's core structures. One, their tone, their values, and the way in which they want to be engaged. And that is why this conversation matters. And as a Christian, the thought came to me that what if in times like these, this generation is or can be leveraged to be the loudest advocate for the spreading of the Christian faith? And if so, the question is, for leaders and followers who are Christians, working in partnership with them, how can we harness their strength so that as a driving force, they can work together to advance the gospel to the next generation, particularly in a digital age? So that is somewhat why the conversation matters and that's somewhat the genesis of the research to get to the bottom of it.
Maple, before we move on, can you give us the answers to those two questions? Really appreciate your heart in just wanting to dive and really understand this generation. So, how many millennials are there right now?
So, with respect to the answers to the two questions, how many millennials are there right now? There are about 1.8 billion millennials today. And with respect to denominations, it's a frightening number of approximately 47,000. It ranges from 45 to 48,000. And these two statistics matter because they raise questions among many people, including the millennials, on impact, on reach, on choices. So these statistics, they do play a part in how we actually understand these millennials, as well as how the faith is presented to them.
So, after listening to millennials particularly and analyzing the data, what do you think, Maple, is the most important story that merged?
The most important revelation that emerged from this research is that the participants they stated that they want to contribute. They want to be participants and not spectators in fulfilling their own destiny. And today they feel that they're being programmed by society to fit traditional boxes. And there's an innate need and a preference to build a better society than they have inherited. And not necessarily materially, but they want to own as well as not to adopt. They want to own and create their own belief as they seek or try to find their spiritual space, safe space, that is. So what really challenged, what a challenge common assumption is that the next generation is losing interest in Christianity may not necessarily be true. I quote from the book that many millennials are not rejecting faith outright. They are questioning authenticity, relevance, and integrity. They're asking, does this belief align with real life? And can this belief system hold up under scrutiny? So, based on the Pew Research outcome, their research indicated that in 2023 to 2025, the Christianity was the largest global religion, and it fell during that period from 31 to 28%. And unaffiliated or non-religious groups grew from 17 to 24% over the same 2-year period. This shift is evident that they are not necessarily abandoning the faith, but they're more likely sitting on the fence waiting to be convinced. And with over 46,000 Christian denominations, for them, who is correct? I want to elaborate on this a little more because the next generation is determined to choose their own path. And they resent being labeled as lazy, entitled, overconfident, idealistic, or even instant gratification, and the many labels that we have heard about from time to time. Hearing them voice these unwanted generalizations gave me cause to ponder. And let us put on our critical thinking hat right now and see if we can get a different perspective. So what if labels such as laziness is resistance to the suppression of their curiosity, creativity, and ingenuity? What if their job hopping approach is a discontent or a reaction to the traditional establishment, lack of relevance to the current trends and their innovative ideas? What if entitlement is because they were never given the opportunity to solve problem on their own because they are always being rescued? What if moral decay is that there are no credible role model, and so standards are now viewed as impossible to attain? And so I would say that what I found is that there is a balance between continuity and change. And every generation inherits values, beliefs, and lessons. But they're also interpreted through their own experiences. There's often this tension that developed between generations. The older feels that something is valuably is being lost, and the younger generation feel that the experience and excitement of discovering something new is not being entertained. And so in reality, while both are happening at the same time, every period involves both loss and emergence.
So does that offer hope for how, let's say, church or a faith community can engage the next generation, you think?
So with this tension, if it goes on to be not acknowledged, it can develop into a friction between the generations. And the relationships at that time is being tested. And as each side struggle to understand the other perspective. This divides often would weaken the connection that allows wisdom, experience, and new possibilities to be shared across generations. So to the part that you mentioned regarding is there hope for the church? And I would say absolutely. It offers hope because an entire generation is seeking answers. And in so doing, they're open. I just want to mention, for maybe many persons may not even watch this show, but there is this very popular and with a lot of awards called Ted Lasso. And the well-known line is, be curious, not judgmental. And that's what the millennials are saying. They're saying, don't increase your criticism about us. It's just improve your pitch. This is what we call in business a value proposition. You see, there is this deep human desire that doesn't change. And that is people still seek meaning, they seek belonging, they seek purpose. And the method, the language, and the expression that happen from time to time keep evolving, but those core longings remain constant. Think about this. Most people say social media is to be blamed for the growing isolation of the youth. But if we examine that a little more closely, we'll see that it's really the manifestation of, or an attempt to fill the gap, searching to find connection. They genuinely want guidance, support, and affirmation. And the evidence is that there's this desire for them to have the likes, the shares, the clicks, the apps, the followers, the influencers, all because they want to be a part of a community where they find some form of commonality. So recognizing and addressing the desire for purpose and meaning, the belief and their belief, this will help bridge and inspire hope, especially when it is carefully, sincerely, and intentionally communicated and expressed. So yes, there is hope. It's about how we engage and how we build relationships.
Wow. Mayple, thank you for sharing those findings. They're really challenging our thinking because for me, one takeaway stands out is that many of them appear to value authenticity. They're intentional about choosing their own path They don't want to just follow tradition. They're not content just sitting on the fence, like you said. They're looking for reasons to be convinced. So I think we're challenged to, instead of just labeling them as lazy or disengaged, we actually need to put on that critical thinking hat. That's better question. So thank you for that. My next question, I had a privilege of reading your book, and in your book you wrote about the importance of pestle.
In my book, I talked about the environmental scan consisting of political, social, technological, legal, and environmental conditions. And I expanded on these with copious examples and the various ways in which these conditions have shaped the thoughts and the beliefs of the millennials, because it does that for everyone. And I just want to quickly quote from my book a section that speaks to this, and it says, "The design of our environment plays a critical role in shaping our behavior, and our cognitive processes forms the foundation of our value system. These values act as guiding principles that influence our choices, shape our priorities, and inform our responses to everyday events. So even when our intentions are sincere and our goals are largely defined, the environment around us can either support our focus or serve as a source of distraction." How these influence behavior, it's not something that we can immediately just put our finger on. It is something that takes place years and years in formation. Spiritually, it's not built in isolation or from the broader environment. Spirituality is a part of the interconnected pieces to become one holistic enterprise for the individual. And behaviors and beliefs are shaped around our realities, our lived experiences, as well as these are filtered through whether our conditions are determined by political purity or corruption, economic transparency or manipulation, leadership honesty or duplicity, immigration tolerance or resistance, geopolitical realities or conspiracies. So of course, religious beliefs are no different. Church hurt, divisions, abuse, fragmentation are definitely detractors. And they're saying they have seen a lot of this. What they have expressed is that they are already anxious about things like affordability, parenting, raising their family, work-life balance, and they have no bandwidth for internal strife or power struggles, whether in the home, in the church, in the workplace, or in society at large. There is this mission that they have, which is they want to protect their mental health. It's already fragile, and they do not need another set of conditions to put them in a worse position.
I appreciate you highlighting how that shapes how we see the world and influence our beliefs, and the whole importance of that mental skill. And Rita and I are actually starting a cohort of training people in brain skills. That's what helped me and Rita, because we have children who are millennials and we have to grow in our parenting skills. So thank you for highlighting that, because understanding it helps us move beyond just assumptions and just really grow in our empathy. Moving from what's wrong with this generation to what conditions are shaping their thinking. How can we engage them with understanding? So I want to ask you one more question. Mayple, how have these factors build or break trust?
So these factors, how they build or how they break trust is that millennials are at a intersection, and that intersection is where they're experiencing, as we mentioned earlier, rapid technological, cultural, and social changes, often while questioning long-held institutions, including faith. They, like everyone, they all shelter this generic mistrust where and when standards are preached but not practiced, where promises are not fulfilled but given, and where expectations are not realized. So these things help to determine whether or not they will trust what is happening around them and who is giving those messages. And I have shared at length in my book about the pastel factors that affect them and why they need answers or clarity to strengthen their belief system. Their curiosity, rather than being a threat, can actually deepen faith conversations if we engage with them thoughtfully. So the millennials are not looking for a place to worship. They're looking for churches. No, they're not looking for a place to worship. They're looking for churches that value honest conversations, invest in their growth, cultivate a genuine sense of community. This is what resonates with their desire to belong to a meaningful spiritual community. And I give you an example whereby the recent World Cup fever, even myself become all excited about it, even though I only know the basics about the game. But how quickly the world lean into choosing favorites, even with a distant community, with people they have never met or they don't know anything about, but they feel the competitive commonality and they value the skill that they see at play in the craft. I even become a couch coach with attachment to particular teams. Why? Is because we identify with the players at a level where their history, their personal stories, their failures, their successes, their emotional tears, jubilation, that all created the need for connection and identifying with them in a relationship that is even bigger than ourselves. So that's the kind of stuff that human beings in general are like, but the millennials are no different, and they're looking at that at even a deeper level because of the way in which things have gone viral, and they're operating in that era of digital space.
Wow. Thank you for that insight. You were talking about being authentic. So, what does that actually mean for millennials? What does authenticity actually mean? Because you're telling us we need to find common ground, we need to be relatable. Would you give us some insights about that?
What does authenticity means actually is that authenticity is simple an alignment of honesty and follow through. Credibility is aligning those words with the behaviors. So it's about consistency, reliability, honoring commitments, accountability, empathy. They're plugged into feelings and the idea around these types of quote unquote leadership type skills, and that's what they want to see in people who they want to imitate. So when there's a misalignment, there's a retraction and the entire person or situation comes under scrutiny for them. Again, a chapter is written on leadership in the book and the weight of influence, describing good and bad examples from a godly perspective. And as we know, the Bible hasn't hidden anything from us. They give us the good, the bad, lessons and warnings, as well as ways in which we can imitate and see good examples that we can use as our guide. So like any leader, spiritual leaders must be prepared to answer hard questions and deliver value. Simply telling someone to have faith or to trust God or obey God is often not enough for them. And what do these phrases actually mean and how they live it out in practical everyday life is what they're looking for, not the slogans. They want clarity, they want application that resonate with their current lives, day-to-day lives. So recognizing and addressing the desire for purpose and meaning and belief help to build bridges that inspire hope, especially when carefully and sincerely communicated. So that is the situation around the millennials as they aspire towards building a place where they have that kind of understanding and overall relationship that they can tap into.
This is the first time, I believe, in the history, we have 5 generations working together, worshiping together, and living together. I look at it as a great opportunity, but also one of the greatest challenges we could be facing if we don't learn to understand one another. So in a culture where information is everywhere, how do we teaching people what to think to helping them to learn how to seek the truth and how to develop it, which is genuinely on their own and not just because it was forced upon them by somebody else? And also, what would an ideal environment of growth look like from your research and findings in the book?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I really think it's something that we should all put our minds to as we approach a generation that definitely do not like to be told how to think, but or what to think, but really how to think. So teaching how to think is about the battle of the mind. The mind is either directed or dominated. It doesn't stay in limbo. It's not neutral. And so the key is to focus on helping the next generation to think upward and outward. Because again, from the scriptures, all good things come from God above. For the millennial spiritual journey, I find is not a one-size-fits-all. Every believer's path is shaped by different experiences, questions, and seasons of life. And we alluded to that earlier as well during our discussion. But yet too often, the mature Christians, perhaps unintentionally, try to fit the next generation into the same mold that shaped their lives, rather than helping them discover how timeless biblical truth apply within their own context. So I want to re-emphasize again, based on what they have told me, this is not really my opinion, this is what they have shared with me at length. And so they're not seeking answers, right? Or answers that is something off the cuff. They are looking for answers that are grounded in genuine action-oriented support. They don't want the performative stuff or the lip service. All too often we'll use cliches and platitudes, and sometimes we cloak that in scriptures, but we fail to provide that practical substance that is meaning for them and the guidance that they're searching in order to improve their lives, to help them to see value, to help them to better navigate life's pathway. And so, to give you a few examples, it's a millennial would say to me that when they ask questions trying to get some answers, it's like, what's my purpose? And the response would be like, God has a plan for you. You just have to wait. And quotes stuff like Jeremiah 29:11. Another one would say that in their response to a job loss, the answer to them is trying to get some solace or some ways of dealing with this disappointment. The Christian would say to them, everything happens for a reason. Just stay positive. Trust God, it's timing, and everything will be worked out. And they quote Romans 8:28. Another one shared with me that they were going through a financial strain and trying to get some advice or to consult with someone who they believe would be in a position to help them. And the answer was, give thanks. Look at so many people are worse off than you are. Moreover, your position could be because of your poor choices. While these scriptures are non-negotiable spiritual biblical truth, millennials' expectation is for practical experience, for measurable guidance, and for directional application. They want to be able for you to be help them to move forward, not to just empathize with them in the situation that they're in. So for example, some things that I find very useful and which they find very helpful is stuff like help them to build a vision board, help them with their goal setting, and teach them a little about financial planning, algorithm diplomacy as they walk through the media space, and corporate etiquette, how to behave in a boardroom, how to navigate landmines, how to respond in a conflict. So these are the things that are adding value to them, and that's what they find valuable to help them to, as I said, navigate how to succeed and not just to quote the scriptures. So those of us are kids who grew up or are kids in the church, again, as they come of age, they start asking questions. We taught them the Bible stories. We tell them that they need to be control their feelings. They need to tolerate pressures and the various obligations that and duties that they need to do, like more of the works rather than the grace side of it. So the grace side of it is not played up enough for them to really see the love of Jesus. And so in doing so, they will ask questions like, why is the Bible the truth? And the answer would be, because it's God's words. And then they will say, how do we know it's God's words? And they would say, because the Bible says so. This kind of circular reasoning is frustrating, and it challenges their critical thinking skills because they have inquisitive minds and they're looking for informed answers. Their curiosity leads them to this desire whereby they need reasoning, evidence, logic, defense, and also they seek answers wherever if you can't get it from the Christians, they're going to seek it from other places. And often enough, when they go on their search, some of them became radicalized. So we have to be able to, as I said, answer those hard questions and help them prepare for some of the different things that they will be facing in life. I find that when I was talking with them in the interviews and the focus groups, the millennials and also the Gen Zs, which is a generation that's following them, they treat life like a courtroom. I say that because they are not necessarily rejecting or going against truth, but they're seeking a compelling case to support that truth. And they are expecting thoughtful reasoning and personal testimonies and experiences and mistakes and success stories that they can draw from in their current situation that is meaningful in pointing them in a positive direction. So rather than responding to these questions with repetitive talking points, judgments, and dismissiveness, what they're asking us to be is to be more thoughtful, and our biblical answer should be somewhat be compassionate in the way in which we defend the gospel, not more like a directive. It's more a softer tone and more forgiving and graceful way of embracing them through their challenges and questions. So and you know what? I find that even for myself, speaking to Christians, some of the older Christians cannot defend the gospel at all because they have not taken the time to invest into God's words and to make connection with the daily lives. They read the Bible more like a rote or a duty rather than being able to make the connections. And so when we live our lives separately, like the spiritual life is over here and the work life is over here and the marriage is over there, we find that we're not able to reflect and connect the gratitude for God's grace, His providence, and His power, and see this born itself out in front of these millennials. And hence, if we don't have real testimonies to give, or stories to share in a meaningful way, then it's not as convincing for the millennials, and I suppose for anyone, because we need to be real with what's happening in our lives. Seeking the truth in order to them to develop that faith of their own is that the church is encouraged to, or all of us as Christians are encouraged to cultivate leaders who can engage both the heart and the mind at the same time and demonstrate our faith not as blind belief, but that trust should be grounded in the Word of God with a relationship with Christ, and of course relying on the indwelling Holy Spirit to be our guide, and so they can see the Trinity working in our lives, not just in lip service, but the practical part of how we live.
Sometimes as parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, we can come with that assumption. Today's goal for us, even as we listen to you, is to figure out how we can understand the next generation and not assume. I think many a time we run from assumption, right? When we don't understand something, we assume. And so we run from that assumption. I'm a good parent, so they will follow me. I have been giving to them, which means they will do what I do. But I guess that's not necessarily the case from what you're saying and from what your research is showing. What gives you the greatest hope about millennials and faith? And what invitation would you offer to those who want to move from understanding this generation to walking alongside them with curiosity, wisdom, and grace?
What gives me the most hope about millennial and faith? I find that what I see they respond to in a very intentional way is listening. Not listening to hear them, but listening so that we don't listen only to respond or in anticipation to respond. We listen because we want to hear them, and they can feel that because it's always about how you make someone feel. And so truth does not fear questions, because in fact, sincere questions often become the doorway to deeper convictions Because when you can wrestle through that information and in a civil way come to conclusions, that really open up the door for further engagement and dialogue. I find that ultimately, as millennials mature, they also move away from the who I am. And as I said, the millennials are aging between 30 to 45 years old. And their questioning now starts to evolve towards things how do I remain faithful? So even those who were in the church, they start to question it as well. How do I remain faithful amidst all these responsibilities? How do I raise the next generation? And what kind of legacy I want to leave for my children or for my community? And churches that respond with the genuine answers through relationship and biblical teachings in a compassionate, pastoral care manner, usually they are well positioned for these millennials to develop a lasting and sustainable relationship. You mentioned about how do we move from misunderstanding them to a place where we can walk alongside them, and that is the nucleus of the whole discussion. How do we walk alongside them so that we can prepare them for the next goal? And this cohort is a large reservoir of opportunity to tap into. And to break down the generational divides, we know it happens in every generation, and we just have to curate ways in which we can be successful at it, and to promote more of a partnership with them, and with the intention of helping them to predict and to create a tangible value chain. In other words, we should be helping them solve problems, think differently, and to add value to their lives. The world is slowly, not slowly, rapidly being led by the millennials, and soon that will be the age group that will be the full leadership hierarchy. And some of our most powerful leaders today are, we may or may not be aware of it, but yes, J.D. Vance is the vice president for arguably the most powerful nation on earth. We have Prince William, who will be the next king and oversee a number of the Commonwealth countries. We have Mark Zuckerberg, who is the king of part of the whole viral social media space where people consume information on a daily basis. We have Aidan Gomez, which is the Canadian AI expert, who, again, that is, we're moving into that era. We have singers like Drake or Taylor Swift. They are all millennials. And their decisions, their opinions, their contribution, their influence, we live under these day to day. And these millennials, they're looking to them as their success stories. And so we have to understand that these influencers' mindsets, so that we can have a comparable defense for when we want to share into that space that is being given to them. Because as I said, the mind is either dominated or directed, and something is taking its place. And if we want to get some space in their mental space, we need to understand how their peers are thinking, and so help to direct them towards independent thinking, including the decisions that they make on faith-based subjects. Here's an example that one millennial shared with me, and it somewhat stick with me over the months. And he mentioned that he was trying to find a job, and he approached a senior HR who works for a very reputable company, and this person is in his church, and knows his background, knows his parents, knows exactly his work ethics and stuff. So that was a given. And when he asked for help to find a new job, the response was that send me your resume and I will give you some tips. Here is the disconnect. To a millennial, tips can be found on the internet, lots of it. AI can write the most polished resume. So their expectation is not about tips, it's about empowerment and enablement to create an environment whereby you can, for example, introduce them to your network, your vast network. Perhaps set up a coffee break with one of your colleagues so that they could conduct that somewhat interview or career chat just to see where they're at and guide them in some goal setting. Where they could help them through some mentorship, coaching around company standards, and as I mentioned earlier, how you operate in the workplace so that you can be visible, so that you can add value, and so that you have the right sponsorship. Because these are the things that matter, that AI is not necessarily capable of doing, the human piece, that I would call that the human capital piece. So teaching them how to fish rather than giving them fish for life is what they're looking for. They're looking for us to show how their skills travel and carry value across portals, space, rooms, and time. So helping them to break down some of the mental barriers that they have formed over the years for various reasons, back to the pastel situations. We need to help them to eradicate things like being fearful, being lacking in confidence, knowing their worth, they have proper branding. All this is achieved through mentorship and helping them, and who can do that better than the people who have experienced it before. And sometimes some of the best way in which we can help them to do that is through the act of service, so that they can be inspired by seeing the gratitude, what they have when they are able to see other situations that they can compare it to. And so during these acts of service, they are also learning leadership roles, empathy, commitment, and teamwork, and a number of those things which have helped them to grow in their soft skills and putting them sometimes in a position that is a competitive advantage compared only to the academics or the technical knowledge. So sharing your title and the positions you own and the ego and the importance, it's not good enough for them, because they are in a position where they want us to help them succeed both in the secular and spiritual world as they grow from one stage to the next. And so once they feel the sincerity of what you're offering and see the value that you have contributed to their well-being, now they're open to listen. And so because they are open to listen, you can build a dialogue, you can build a conversation and take it to the next level, and they trust to engage them. In other words, we have built that relationship. So once they feel that that relationship is genuine, now they feel saved, and now they can take whatever you have to offer to the next level, which includes speaking about spiritual, faith-based subjects. The mind, as we said, is not easily manipulated when values are strong and when convictions are self-determined, because they have come to their own convictions. And so it's difficult to silence that voice which they already have, and they, as we said, they live out loud. So when you give them that higher purpose and why the mission is important, they will be in a position to speak with more clarity, to defend God's word with more experiential convictions, because that's what they have gone through and what they have heard from us. And so this is the best way in which we can cement trust in this
I
journey.
know there's parents among us right now and mentors, maybe, or even church leaders. If there's only one thing we can remember or go back today from your research, what would you want it to be? And how might that one insight change the way we engage our next generation?
It's very hard to pick any one thing. And this is really a great question because there are so many things that really need to intersect in order to build up the broader human capital and social capital and faith-based capital. It's a number of things coming together at an intersection. And so we need to be cognizant of our environment as well as to try and understand our audience, and because all of this matter. So as we depart from the fear-based dogma that's designed to control through obedience or reward compliance and standardize one's mindset, we should move more towards embracing thought-provoking dialogue and more liberating contributory independent thinking among our millennials, because that's the mindset they have. So we need to feed that. In short, we need to teach them to take authority over their mind, just like in 2 Corinthians 10:5, he said, take captive every thought. And this is not only a command from the Bible, it's something which we need to live through and use that to cut through the noise, because that's the way in which we can help them to become more creative as they manage their mind in a very responsible way. And the wisdom that we have added to that will only help them to move beyond some of the past errors or the things that once held them captive, or just keep recircling in their minds, and they binge think and all of that stuff that can really paralyze your thinking process. And a lot of grace being given so that they can see that there is hope and different ways of approaching things. And so in so doing, they will now start drawing godly wisdom from a more discerning place rather than a reactive place where they are following exactly what the world has to offer. So I quote something that they say in particular. We are not opposed to older generation guidance, discernment, wisdom, and transfer of institutional knowledge. However, we prefer to create our own path forward, built on mutual partnership, respect, and exchange, where we are seen, heard, and valued in our own ways, approach, and ingenuity. And that's a direct quote from them regarding how they want to be engaged. And so a key insight is that what I walk away with is that we are in the age of integration. And once when the internet, the map, the music, the calculator, the camera were separate pieces, today they all collapsed into a smartphone as a one-stop shop. And this has created an expectation from our millennials. That's how they want things. That's how they respond to things. That is what is driving their focus. So to borrow from a secular example, Elon Musk, who is the first trillionaire, have shown how in his technology he's able to integrate innovation in space, in transportation, in finance, in software, in communication, and so forth. So that brings one holistic view, even though there are many different pieces. And so what we have to start doing is to disarm these silos and not treat Christianity different from our careers, parenting, sports, media, but to bring it into one, what we call global reality, where there is integration that will have a spiritual aspect integrated in it as well. So let's circle back to where we started in posing the question about, can this generation become that agency or advocacy for the Christian mission? Because that's really what we're trying to achieve. And can we really tap into this demographic group based on their size, their digital capacity, their innovation and visibility, to become the catalyst for meaningful change? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves. And we need to start thinking that at this juncture, can we become responsible as Christians to invest our time and to amplify the biblical truth? And how can we help to reinforce the biblical truth, the core values that stem from that, and demonstrate the type of faith in all areas of our lives so they can see it as something to imitate, because it's producing that harvest or good fruit that comes with that lifestyle. It's like have to care enough for spiritual well-being of the next generation. Everybody should have that on their mind. And the reason why we need to do that is that they influence the generation below them. And if this huge mass is not really helped to navigate and to interpret and understand what is truth and what the Bible has to offer, then we're losing a great gap or a great deal of opportunity to influence the way in which they actually live their life. And they just need, as they mentioned before, that our Christianity that is delivered or played out in front of them is intellectually credible, but not only that, it's spiritually transformative and it's practically relevant. When those things are put together, there is no doubt that this will certainly inculcate meaning, purpose, and a strong belief system in what has worked over since creation. So that's somewhat the mindset around the insight, that if I want to leave one thing with you, that's something that I would do or say.
Excellent. I'm just thinking just how I relate and connect with the younger people. It's funny because you think you know, and then you realize I don't really know that much. We're grateful for this knowledge that we can have, that we have people who have done the work so that all of us could benefit from it.
I am going to actually just share my biggest takeaways because, Mayple, you've given us so much, especially as a parent of millennials, to really take and reflect. So one of the things that I've learned is today's generation is not simply asking, what do you believe? They're asking, can I see it lived out? They're looking for people whose lives match their words. So thank you for that. Secondly, I really believe practical discipleship matters. Scripture is powerful. We can throw out those scriptures, but people need someone to walk alongside them. So what I'm hearing you say is, rather than offering these quick answers, they want mentors who will listen well, who are going to ask thoughtful questions, demonstrate what following Jesus looks like in everyday life. I think about that quote, faith is caught as much as it is taught. And all I heard was relationship, build trust. And then third, I think it's important for us to just be curious, because curiosity matters. Instead of assuming that we already know why younger generations think the way they do, we have to resist that circular reasoning and become learners. Their experiences are shaped by a different world. And when we understand those conditions that shape them, we can respond with greater wisdom, compassion, and effectiveness. So I think the question isn't simply, how can we reach the next generation? The deeper question is, who are we becoming? So are we becoming people of integrity, people whose inner life match our outer life, people who remain calm, curious, relational when we are faced with difficult questions? Are we people who reflect the character of Christ in both our convictions and our conversations? And that is not easy. And that's why Rita and we do these coaching programs, because we really need to learn how to internalize and have a community of people who can support us and give us these new skills. So we want to really extend this special offer in the mid-August till September for 5 weeks. Each of those sessions are practical, interactive. You're going to learn brain-based relational skills. It's grounded in scripture. You can practice them during the week. You can receive coaching with a supportive community. And then together we're developing those habits that help us to listen better, respond with wisdom under pressure, repair relationships, and lead with integrity.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayple. We have put the link as well for Maple's book. And if anybody or any of you want to reach her, I'm sure you can connect with her and find her book. We are very grateful for all the wisdom that we received today, and just even encouragement and hope that we can engage the next generation. And it's not too late. It can be a time of great learning. It can be a time where we can say that we're no longer stuck in the way we used to be. Rather, we are willing to be progressive. We are willing to change, not compromise the truth. Thank you for helping us understand what the next generation think like. And from all your research and from all your work, I'm really looking forward to connecting with you and learning more about this as well. And if this conversation encouraged you, all of you, please do share it with other people, maybe in your church community or organization or even family. I guess we're coming to the end of our session with the links for books if you want to look out and purchase a book, as well as a link to the group coaching that Pam and I talked about earlier. It's 5 sessions, and many people who have gone through it with us have really enjoyed, and we have received a lot of great feedback. Research doesn't necessarily mean start over. It just means gain a new understanding and have that hope that I can take one step at a time and I can actually change. Almost 9 years ago, when I was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, I thought to myself, it's all over. But then I had to really change my mind and go, no, it's not over. I can do something about it. And I went and I learned. And now I know that I can impart that teaching to other people, because if it can work for me, it can work for anybody. Stay tuned and have a great weekend.
That wraps up today's episode of Midday Musings on Life and Leadership. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
If today's conversation encouraged you, please subscribe to Midday Musings so you never miss an episode, and share it with someone who could use a little generational reset of their own. We'll see you next time.